Hey everybody, Jeff Brown here, and I'm here with a very special guest I've known for a long time, Betsy Chasse. Let me read you Betsy's bio, and then we'll get into it. Award-winning filmmaker, best-selling author, change maker, mom. Best known as the co-writer, director, and producer of the hit film What the Bleep Do We Know? I saw that a long, long time ago. She has also produced the award-winning Song of the New Earth, Pregnant in America, Radical Dating, and The Empty Womb. She's authored multiple books, including the documentary Masterclass, Tipping Sacred Cows, remember that book, and What the Bleep Do We Know? Also discovering the endless possibilities to altering your everyday reality. Is that a separate book or that's
No, that's the Bleep book.
That's the subtitle. Okay.
Yeah.
And now available from Rampant Feline Media. Her new book is called All You Need Is Love. I endorse that book. The Importance of Transcending Spiritual Cliches. It's interesting because the word transcending is also a spiritual cliche, but we'll get into that. And Living Their Deeper Wisdom. And it's a book with a bunch of kind of essays from various people on these themes.
Yeah.
Great. So how are you?
I'm good, I think. How are you?
A little shaky today. You know, I'm moving back between houses, so just in that process, it brings up some stuff. And
yeah,
but done. We completed what we wanted to do today, so that felt good.
Good.
I thought maybe I would start by just reading a definition from my new book, Grounded Spirituality, which is pretty explosive right now, and it might be a good way to start in terms of getting into your new book. So this is a definition of a term that I developed years ago called New Cage, or the New Cage movement. A term to describe the more ungrounded, dangerous, and simplistic elements of the New Age movement, including, but not limited to, wishful thinking mantras, spiritual bypassing, premature forgiveness practices, superficial healing techniques, the perpetual denial of common sense realities, and the insistence on inflated, fantastical perspectives. For example, everything is an illusion. It's all perfect. There are no victims. Everything that happens is meant to be. All judgments are bad. Suffering doesn't exist. You are responsible for everything that happens to you. Just ask the universe for what you want, you'll get it.
Mm.
Everything you see and feel is a reflection of you. Everything. And change your thinking, change your life, etc., etc., and on it goes. Where it stops.
Jeff, I have been asking the universe for a hot man in a Maserati for like 25 years, and that has not shown up, and I must be a failure being spiritual.
No, you're it's all good, right? You are
right?
So blessed, because the reality is that which you sought to manifest would actually be the thing that destroys you. You see, in the New Cage world, you win no matter what happens.
I like this New Caged world, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Real.
Talk about your life, and I'll reframe it in New Cage terms. And you're, like, is there something that's bothering you? Something this week you've been worrying about money, like anything? I mean, just share it with me, and I'll give you a New Cage reframe. And you'll be good for an hour, 2 hours. It's good. It feels good for a couple of hours to transform reality until reality brings you back, crashing back down to earth.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you wrote there. I love everything that you write there. So because I relate. I resonate with what you speak.
Your vibration and my vibration are aligned.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you some questions. When you did What the Bleep Do We Know, which was, I think, perceived by some to be very much a part of the New Age or New Cage framework by some. And now it's how many years later since What the Bleep Do We Know came out?
I think we're like 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Yeah, okay. Is that right?
Yeah.
So now looking back on the perspective that you brought forth in the film, and having had great many different experiences around this thing called spirituality, how do you see that film? Do you feel aligned with everything that was shared in that? or does some of it just feel like nonsensical to you now?
So, okay, I'm going to surprise you for a second, because I still feel aligned with everything that we shared in the film.
Okay.
Because pretty much, for the most part, what we shared is still true. What I don't necessarily feel aligned with is how it was taken, the takeaways that even maybe I had, because I still understand the concept of the biggest thing that what the Bleep said was you create your reality. And that is still true to me, but not in the way that people think it's true. It's true in the sense that I still believe that I get to decide how I want to feel about stuff. That's a true thing. Like we can talk about what we want to about spirituality, but at the end of the day, I get to go, do I want to be mad? Do I want to be angry? Do I want to be happy? How is this going to make me feel? There's the visceral reaction, and then there's choice. And that's a neurological behavioral response. That's science. So
okay, hold on. So what I hear you saying is not that you believe that we create every element of our reality, right, but that there's a decision to be made as to how we perceive that reality. That's a very different statement than you create your reality.
Right, but if you go back and watch the film, and I've had a ton of debate about this. If you go back and watch the film, a lot of what we say is that's what you're doing. We talk a lot about neuroscience, neurological pathways, how you attach meaning, how your brain works. I can totally get how a lot of people, including myself, walked away for a while with the notion that I am literally manifesting reality in front of me as Mercedes can come flying out of my ass, like I can get that. But the way that I can watch the movie now is go, oh, what we're saying is you get to choose how you want to respond and how you experience the world. And I do believe that. I do believe
right, but that feels like a different movie. So maybe it's time to import a more of a grounded spirituality framework into this inquiry.
Sure.
And talk about how we can interface with our various traumatic experiences, for example, in a way where choice is involved. Now, at the same time, while being sensitive to the fact that not in every traumatic situation does somebody have a choice. Some situations are so horrific that any human organism would respond in a particular way to them.
Right.
But at the same time, I know from my own experience growing up as I did that I probably shouldn't even be here now,
Right.
And so how I came in as a soul, choices I made along the way, grandparents that empowered me to believe in myself, some form of resilience that existed in me that didn't exist in others made a huge difference.
Right.
But I also understand that that's not true for everybody, and I try to be sensitive to the fact that not everybody has those resilient qualities for whatever reason. And many people went through traumatic experiences that were, as much as I thought I went through a horror show of a childhood, I now do work with people who had childhoods that I can't even begin to understand. They're so horrifying. And so I think it's important to import this idea that you have a choice in how you interface with various realities, while at the same time being sensitive to the fact that sometimes we don't and we can't.
Well, let me give you an example. In my book, in the chapter that I write in All You Need Is Love, one of the things that we do in the book is we take memes or quotes. The idea is that New Age, New Thought, and the spiritual path has sort of been turned into a 3 easy steps, 142 characters to enlightenment, basically. Yeah. You read quote and then you're done. And so the quote that I take on is a quote that basically says, I don't remember the exact words, but it basically says, like, how I feel is not your responsibility. Like, how I feel is my responsibility.
Well, sometimes, unless we're in a relational field together.
Right, but so here's what I would say to that. There's 2 answers. 1, absolutely true. For the perfect enlightened master who is like way conscious, super aware, and can sort of like live in this like unreactive space. Sure.
You mean the human being who doesn't exist?
Right. However, for most of us, the way that I've seen that quote be used on me and other people is that I get to be a jerk because I'm spiritual now, right? I'm a spiritual master, and my actions shouldn't impact you.
Well,
and
right.
What's happened in this world is that we've turned into a bunch of narcissistic assholes who don't take responsibility for our actions. And so I can see, oh, my kitty is saying hello. I can say.
I manifest that, actually.
Right, hang on. Here, kitty, go ahead. He got stuck outside with me. I can say, so it's like, yes, spiritually speaking, if you were to go back to the great masters, that's true. But like, I don't know anybody who's capable of living that way all of the time.
Well, there are no great masters. They're just really effective at master evasion. And the nature of patriarchal spirituality is the delusion that they're more awakened or more enlightened and distinct from the human experience. So
I think there's some wisdom to be offered from some of those.
Wisdom is different from awakened and enlightened and
true.
mystery. Yeah. I absolutely agree that there's wisdom in all kinds of strange and interesting places in the world.
Right.
But I think that the nature of what we've called spirituality is basically a patriarchal construct that has very conveniently split our spirituality from our humanness. So the guru can sleep with everybody, he can steal your money, and he can say, you know what, that was just my personality, that was just my human form, but that's not really who I am in the awakened sense. And that's the whole control and manipulation game, the godjectification game that we've been living with for centuries.
Right.
And I think that, why I wrote Grounded and why you've written and brought this new collection together is because we're tired of this nonsense. We're tired of seeing these two different realities as though spirituality can exist independent of our humanness, independent of our feelings, independent of our egos, independent of our bodies, our stories, our identifications, as though all of those things, our anger, everything that we've experienced in our life, all of our traumas are an illusion or unreal, and that there's this more real, more awakened place that we can all go to. That place, for me, is really death, essentially, and it's self-avoidance masquerading as enlightenment, and for me, it's a kind of living death, because you have to really destroy all of that unresolved feeling in your beingness through some meditative stupor or meditative addiction and this quest for equanimity and all of this absolute and utter disconnected, dissociative nonsense, and then you can feign some level of awakening. The problem with it is that all that unresolved material is still living in the bones of your being and will show up for even the masters, and in particular the masters, in every part of their personal lives, because there is no integration between their experience of transcendence and their experience of immanence.
Well, and so the way that I believe, I always say when people say to me, everything is an illusion, I say, tell that to my son who just scraped his knee and is bleeding and feeling the pain. There's no illusion there. He hurts.
Yeah.
He hurts.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's a mistake to try to diminish anyone's pain or anyone's experience. I look at this world, this reality, as the plane of experience. I think we're here. I never resonated or got or agreed with or was aligned with this notion that my body was a meat packet, that my ego needed to die, that I needed to transcend everything around here. I look at this whole process as a life, as an opportunity to experience. That's why I'm here. So I get to experience the suffering. I get to experience the joy. I get to experience the rug burn, whatever you want here. I mean, people always look at me, and I was born with a certain level of optimism and a certain level of the resilience to be able to look at the traumas that I've experienced in life. And I've written about many of my traumas, childhood molestation, things that were horrific. And part of the reason that I'm able to sit here today like you are is I do not want to say the spiritual practice is a joke. What I've realized from it is that there's wisdom, but you have to do the work. Like one of the things I think, and one of the things we talk about in this new book is doing the healing is the work. Every one of us has a certain level of trauma. Everyone. We're all going to have trauma in this world. I don't know if mine is more than yours, less than yours. I don't really look at it from that perspective. But what I get to do is decide, do I want to heal from that trauma, or do I want that trauma do I want to carry it for the rest of my life? And I believe that you can heal from the trauma. You just have to do the work. And spirituality and the new age, new thought movement has started to turn this into what I call the McDonaldization of spirituality. Come to my 3-day workshop. You'll be rich, you'll find love, and you'll be healed. And I think that's the lie that we're starting to sell people.
Well, I think we've been selling that lie for decades. And
Yeah.
I think that the whole celebrity movement is a crime against humanity, actually. Yeah, no, I do. I think some of them should be imprisoned, actually, for the way they're misleading people. I think they should be litigated. I think that they're doing horrifying damage, misleading all kinds of trauma survivors, leading them away from healing, leading them away from depthful transformation, leading them away from their bodies. If you're not in your body, you're easily manipulated, and there's no possible way you're going to be able to experience an integrated spirituality. Right. Because you're not in your body. And this whole culture has been so dissociated, so overwhelmed, so overstimulated and distracted that having a depthful experience of even noticing that we have breath moving through our body is very rare for people now. And quite often they're being led in the direction of Vipassana and mindfulness meditations that are helpful on one level, but are dissociative on another level. And re-embodiment practices like somatic psychotherapies are our only hope, because until we can clear the emotional debris that obstructs our capacity for presence, till we define presence as a whole being experience, we're not even here to notice what we're doing to ourselves and what we're doing to our species. And,
so what does it mean to have a spiritual practice to you?
Well, I define spirituality as reality. So any experience or practice that brings me into a more aligned connection to various realms of experience for me is a spiritual practice. So my most potent spiritual practice was doing bioenergetics, body-centered work with Alexander Lowen, because nothing brought me more deeply into my kishkas. Nothing brought me more deeply into my unresolved emotions. Nothing cracked through my armor and brought me into a more expansive connection to a unity consciousness field than doing the work around the emotional debris, because that unresolved material was precisely the material that made it impossible for me to truly be here. So, Tolle's trip about witnessing the pain body and calling that some kind of awareness, for me felt like a first stage of awakening, because if I didn't move from that more expansive perspective and then bring it back down, so if I had a peak experience, but didn't bring it back into integration with my humanness on the emotional level, then it was impossible for me to become a more inclusive, integrated, and present person. So what we've been calling spirituality for centuries, for me, I don't consider spiritual. I don't call that spiritual. So I don't believe in calling myself a spiritual teacher. I think it's utterly preposterous, because I define spirituality as reality. So for me to put myself forth as somebody who is promoting or bringing people into a more absolute, complete experience of reality. You could be a meditation teacher. You could be a master of forgiveness practices and teachings. It's fine, but don't call yourself a spiritual teacher. To me, that just feeds the whole delusion.
When people ask me when I got on my spiritual path, I tell them when I popped out of the vagina.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say, well, I popped into it, man. Hello, welcome to it.
So here we are. So now this book, which I've read, and I endorse this book, there's a number of pieces, a number of very well-written pieces that deal with various aspects of the ungrounded spiritual world, let's say. Right. So what brought you to want to do this book? And you just tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like for you. Why this book now? And how are you feeling about it now that it's out?
So, I can look back on the Bleep, and sometimes I go, gosh, man, maybe I should never have made that movie. But I don't regret it. I said that the other day on an interview, and everyone He was like, no, I'm glad you made it. You should have made it, because it did crack open a conversation. And that's part of my purpose and passion in life, is to, I always turn things on their head. I always want to take something and really, if it gets to be held up too high on a pedestal, I'm the one that wants to look at it and say, wait a minute, is this really what we should be doing? And about over the last few years, as social media specifically has sort of really come into like its power, so to speak, I've just noticed more and more and more of us losing depth and losing connection with work and exploration and a deeper understanding of these cool little memes that everyone wants to share. And about 3 years ago, if anybody's followed me on social, they will notice that besides sarcastic memes, which I share a lot because I kind of like them, and I have if you want to have some fun, I have a Facebook and an Instagram called Spiritual Porn, which is all sarcastic memes about spirituality. It's very fun. But besides those memes, I stopped sharing these quotes. I stopped because I realized anytime I shared them, I would read, I have a decent sized following. I'd read hundreds of comments, and I could read through the comments and realize that most people just, like, because I only shared this piece, people didn't get the depth of the true understanding of what it was that people were trying to teach or trying to say. And I realized in my own life, I started experiencing people who literally said to me, well, they did the weekend Reiki course and now they're a Reiki master. And now all of a sudden, because they're a Reiki master, they're a spiritual teacher, and they need to explain to me that, hey, listen, I realize that I was a horribly emotionally abusive asshole to you, but you're a spiritual woman. It's you get to choose how you feel. So I don't have to take personal responsibility for that, or other things. And I saw other people having these experiences. And I said to my partner, Kate, who we have this company, Rampant Feline Media, I said, okay, this is the beginning for me in my own way of beginning this conversation of saying, hey, you know what? 90% of us don't even truly understand half of the crap that we see on Facebook. We see 142 characters or 200 and whatever it is, and we think we got it. And it's time for us to really do the work. If you really do want to heal, then you're going to have to do the work that you talk about. And I think most of us have started this spiritual bypass of just saying, well, I read that I can memorize the 4 agreements, so now I'm a master, right? So, but
oh God, no, that would be just a terrible thing.
So then you go, okay, well, what do they mean? And how do you really integrate that into your life? And in the last 4 to 5 years, I really, for my own personal work, have started to understand, well, what are my morals and ethics and values? And am I actually living those in life? Or am I just a cliche? Am I just really good at like spewing, but I'm not really truly living? So for me, that's been the work. And this is sort of my beginning volley into this conversation about, hey, this is the bullshit. We need to cut the bullshit. And what I love about the chapters is there's 19 authors. It's not just me. And I went to 19 men and women, and I asked them, what's your favorite spiritual meme? All right, now demystify that, because it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Tell us why. Tell us what that really means, not what it looks like in the cute picture with the baby behind it or whatever we're doing to sell it. What does it really mean? Because I think we've lost meaning. I think we've lost depth and meaning.
Well, I'm with you on that. So, the way I see the journey is that, and this may be in a way what you're saying is, I started really psychotherapeutically. I'd really never thought about spirituality. And then later on, after working with Lowen, and I started to, I did the film with Bhagavan Das, Carmageddon, and began to inquire and say, okay, what is this thing called spirituality? And I asked Al Lowen, what is spirituality? And he said, it's enlivening your body. It's getting your body clear and grounded and present. That's spirituality. That's being spirited. And I would notice that he was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and vital and energized and spirited. And then many of the so-called masters that I would see would be very flatline, talk like automatons, very calmly, seem to be masters of equanimity or doing meditation as some kind of a calming drug practice, but they didn't feel alive to me. I couldn't feel any energy coming off of them. And I thought, well, if that's enlightenment, I don't want anything to do with that. And so as I proceeded on my journey, I've now kind of reached the stage where I don't think of myself as a spiritual anything. I really feel as though what my quest has really always been about was just to become more truly human. And to define spirituality as what it means to be more truly human. So as you look at yourself now personally, not just professionally so much, where do you feel still misaligned, if anywhere, with regards to living in a way that feels more inclusive and integrated and grounded in your spirituality and your humanism?
That's a great question. Depends on the day, probably.
If you could look ahead 5 or 10 years and imagine yourself manifesting the next stages of your own awakening in a really real way, right. What needs to be worked through, what needs to transform within you, and yeah.
Well, I'm grateful that a long time ago, probably in the last 5 years, 6 years ago, I finally figured out that there's no such thing as enlightenment. And that was like a ginormous relief, because now I wasn't a failure.
Takes the pressure off, right?
Right? Now I'm not a failure at it. I'm like, God, I should be able to levitate, and I can't do any of that. And so, I have a ton of work to do on healing wounds. But you know what? Part of what's given me the peace, a lot of people will say to me, Betsy, you're so chill. You're so things will happen. And I mean, part of that's because I was a line producer for 20 years on movie sets, and, things are flying and I had to keep my zen all the time. And so I'm pretty good at keeping chill. But I'm also, about 5 years ago, I finally just decided, for me, okay, Betsy, this is the plane of experience. Life is this journey, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be scary. It's going to hurt like hell, and it's going to feel amazing. And all of these emotions are going to come at you, and everything is going to be okay. So just be present when they show up. And I started allowing myself to be angry when I was angry, and sad when I was sad. And I would start telling people, hey, that really hurt my feelings. And I started to be okay. It's because, God forbid, when you say to somebody, hey, you did that and it hurt my feelings, in the spiritual world, all the wisdom, all the wise people are like, oh, well, what does that mean about you? And so I finally just stopped taking any of that crap in. I stopped. I finally just stopped saying, I could be like, oh, okay, this person hurt me because they're a jerk. Or it's also possible my feelings got hurt because of some trigger, and that's possible too. But I got super present around all of that, and just started to be really good at listening and knowing myself, and having some trust that I've gone through some rough things in the last 9 years. And, just being willing to be present with it, allow it, not judge it, not feel bad about it, not feel shame. I mean, the New Age movement, in my opinion, shames you. You get a lot of shame. And I got sick of it. I got sick of it. It's like, you know what? I drink, I smoke, I cuss. I'm not a vegan. I like meat. Too bad. If that means I'm not spiritual, then okie dokie. Because I let go of all of that, I just stopped caring in a way. I stopped caring. I started focusing on one thing in the last 5 years. Is this in integrity with who I am?
Great.
Is this fit my values? Yes, no. That's it. Hands down. And so when people ask me, it's so funny, I work with, what's your daily spiritual practice? And I'm like, I get up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee and a couple of cigarettes. That's my morning meditation. And they look at me like, oh, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's my thing. Like it's so peaceful. I hang out on my patio, got my birds hanging out with me, smoking, we're drinking coffee, and I don't care anymore. I don't. I care about operating in integrity with, am I being good to this person? And sometimes I'm not. And so if a person says to me, hey, you did that. And I did, that made me, and then and now I'm better at going, yeah, you know what? I totally did. I'm sorry. I like, it's easier to be wrong because now I don't have to worry about it. And think the spiritual police are going to show up at my door and take away my cool crystals because I didn't like play properly. Right. So that's it. That's my spirituality. It's like just keeping connected to like, is this in my integrity? And then when I'm out of integrity, either calling myself on it, or if somebody shows up and says, hey, you were in integrity. Yeah, you're right. I wasn't. Let's clean that up.
Fantastic. You know? It's a great way to approach the question. So let me read your quote and see what you think. Okay? Mm-hmm. From Grounded Spirituality, The Heart of the Matter chapter, my favorite. Quote, the primary cause of our unhappiness is not our thoughts. The monkey mind is not the source of our anxiety. It's a symptom of it. Forget the monkey mind. The mind is not the enemy. Unhealed pain is. Men have been blaming the mind for their neurosis for centuries while deftly avoiding that which sources its maladies, somatic constrictions and unprocessed emotions stored in the body itself. It's like losing your keys somewhere in the house and looking for them in the car. Useless, useless, useless. Until they stop blaming the mind and recognize that its neurosis stems from the unresolved emotional body, there will be no liberation. Shifting out of unhappiness is not a cerebral process. That's just another ineffective Band-Aid. It's a visceral, full-body experience. It's the monkey heart that's the issue. The state of inner turbulence and agitation that emanates from an unclear heart. The more repressed your emotional body, the more repetitive your thoughts. Flooded with unhealed emotions and unexpressed truths, the monkey heart jumps from treetop to treetop, emoting without grounding, dancing in its confusion. Often misinterpreted as a monkey mind, the monkey heart is reflected in repetitive thinking, perpetual anxiety, and negative imagining, all of which are emanating from the emotional body. So my experience was this little game about man game of claiming the mind and then going into the witnessing of the mind, going into one part of the mind to contain the rest of the mind, felt to me like sort of a little impossible game that wasn't going to ever really lead to any true resolution. Because even if I could tame the mind through meditative practices or witnessing practices, eventually the stuff came back into my thinking. But when I would do deep, heart-centered, somatic release work, anger work, grief work with bioenergetic founder Al Lowen, work with Stan Groff and holotropic breathwork. So I went to like an insight and opening workshop with Jack Kornfield and Stan Groff. It was powerful. Governor Dummer Academy in Massachusetts. I love the name because I was trying to get dumber, get out of my head. So I would sit with Jack, and Jack would tell all these lovely and nice stories, and he was really funny. And I don't know, nothing really happened. Like I enjoyed the stories. He's a wonderful storyteller. And then I would sit in Vipassana and just feel kind of like most Westerners, caffeinated, agitated, and annoyed. And then I went and did a holotropic breathwork with Stan Groff, and I threw my mother off my back for 3 hours and threw the assistants off my back for 90 minutes. And by the end of it, I felt so completely present, so completely clear, so completely calm and centered in my mind. And then I looked out at the bulrush field of the Governor Dummer Academy that I felt so distant from and detached from before the workshop. And I felt completely present with it. It was like, wow, isn't this fascinating? I go down into my bones, I release the holdings, and my mind calms right down. And if I don't do that work, I can sit on this fucking meditation cushion for the next 20 years and nothing ever changes. And the only way it'll ever seem to change is if I somehow detach from my humanness altogether and become some kind of meditation automaton. But even then it doesn't work, because then if I have a personal life, it shows up, the material emerges in the relational field, and it's everywhere. So, if we're going to start practicing something called spirituality in a way that's going to help this species, we have to practice it in a way that brings us back into the feeling body. Because the way it seems to me is what's happening is that this disconnected patriarchal spirituality framework just keeps us lost inside of our own individualized awakening, absolutely obsessed with disconnecting from the human fold, the meditation cave guru for 30 years, while the villagers bring him milk and feed him milk, the great master, all this nonsense. And the belief that everything's an illusion, that feelings don't matter, that stories don't matter, that the relational field doesn't matter, then if we're all in that state, none of us are going to notice what's happening to our species and what's happening to our beautiful planet. If we come into our bodies and into our hearts, we begin to notice everything that's happening around us because we're feeling everything again. We get into relationship to each other and in relationship to our environment. And then there's some hope that we can actually make a difference and save the species before it's too late, you know? So do you feel like there is a connection between these, what you called earlier, narcissistic spiritualities and our inability to manifest real change on a societal level?
Well, okay. There's a lot to unpack there. So let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
I already see, now I'm all in my nerd. I got my smoke out. I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying. But here's the thing that I think is really important. Why I create the projects that I create, because to me, I'm interested in really helping people do what you're talking about doing. And I created a series a couple of years ago that now maybe turned into a big time TV series. We'll see, because I'm arguing about holding what I think is important. The only reason that I want to do a reality TV show is that all of what you just talked about, which is true, it's not our thoughts, it's the pain that's causing our thoughts, it's the meaning and belief that we've taken on about the world that we live in. All of that is what causes us to think what we think, right? And I'm a mom. I've got a 15-year-old daughter and an almost 12-year-old son. And what I realized is that we are not taught how to be here and how to relate with each other. Nobody teaches you that. We learn math. We learn social studies. My kids can tell you on what date, what ship landed where. And I'm like, in the light of all eternity, does that really matter if you have no idea how to be in a relationship with other humans? Like, if it's all about you. And so we're not taught these things. And a cool example is like, you know, my kids are like me. We're very outspoken. We're not quiet people. And one of the things that I love about my kids, even when it's like really hard parenting, is my kids will tell me how they feel. Mom, I feel like you aren't trusting me right now because of the questions that you're asking me. Oh, okay, let's talk about that. That's not my intention. Let's clean that up. Because now they're not going to walk around carrying this shit for the rest of their lives. Because I talk to them about, hey, guess what? If you have a feeling and you feel a certain way, talk about it. Most of us didn't learn how to do that, and we didn't learn how to even talk about it. So a lot of what you're talking about is that most of us grown-ups, and I'm going to be 50 in 8 months, most of the people between probably 35, I would say younger generations are slightly better at this. And I will say I'm grateful that my son had mindfulness training in his elementary school. They actually taught him some emotional intelligence. I was pretty stunned at what they were teaching. And this is in a public school. But most of us did not get this education. So we don't even know how to process our emotions. And if we don't know how to process our emotions, we certainly don't know how to relate to somebody else. So we become all about me and protective of me, because I'm over here like just trying not to die, and I don't know how to relate to you. And so we become narcissistic because are emotionally muted, emotionally stunted in arrested development, that how could we possibly relate? How could we possibly think outside of ourselves? We can't even get outside of ourselves because we have so much pain. Because nobody taught us how to be human.
Yeah. So it's like you said earlier, nobody's here. So, so that's the question. What is the bridge back to here? Because if we're not here on a feeling level, then we're not going to be able to relate to others or to the planet or change anything, because we're not here. So all of these ungrounded spiritualities, and this is why I have a problem with them, is that they're not leading us. They're presenting themselves as though they're leading us to the true here, but in fact, they're leading us away from the here, because the only way to come into the here is through the body and through the emotional body and back inside a story and the resolution of all the material that's obstructing our consciousness.
And I think there is some work.
You what?
I think there's some good people out there starting to do the work. You know, I like a lot of what Brene Brown says. I don't like everything that she says. I love a lot of what you say. I think one of the things, and it's been interesting just to like step back and observe humanity's sort of like process, right? You know, in a way, we are in our teenage years as a species.
We are indeed.
And
that's giving us a lot of credit.
Well, it's, you know, teenagers neurologically have a moment where they go from being connected to the mother father, right? Deeply connected, spiritually, neurologically connected, to they have a break. And they go, as they break, they go through a me period.
Individuation.
Right? Individuation. So we're in that individuation state, I think, as a species. I think that we are in that state. And I think that a lot of what's happening on the outside is this breaking down of the domestication, the story, the way things have to be. And that can be really frightening for people. That's why we are where we are politically, is there's a whole group of people that are like, wait, boys are boys, girls are girls, better not change. Like everyone's freaking out over change, right? Because change is hard. So we have to go through, I think humans have to go through this neurological development that we're going through as a civilization. And you asked, well, what's the way back? The way back, my dad actually developed educational programs for adults who didn't learn to read or write. And so he developed ways of teaching adults who had missed an entire part of their development, which is to learn to communicate. And I asked him once, I said, why is it so important to teach, older people to read and write? They're old people. They're done. Why does it matter? And he said, because the truth is they can't evolve until they know how to have this communication. And so giving them this tool is going to change so much of them, their DNA, their genetics. It's just a thing that happens. So I think we have to go back, and I think we have to teach people how to feel. And I think I think people that are doing the work, and there are lots of teachers and people that are doing the work of saying, hey, you need to learn how to feel again. Because that's where we have to start at. We almost have to go back to teaching them how to feel again.
And we
if
need
that
to
makes sense.
Understand that feeling is the spiritual practice, the path back home.
Yeah, because I think once you connect with your feelings, for me, if I feel sad, I can feel sad and it's not going to drop me into a massive depression because now I know how to process sad.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The way I think of it is that we've been trapped for centuries inside of a survivalist consciousness where we just define who we are by what puts food on the table, and we organize our consciousness around that. And now we're trying to move towards a more authentic consciousness where we define who we are by this thing called sacred purpose, or, and that has something to do with dropping below the armored survivalism of the regressive consciousness that's 40% of America, apparently, and move in the direction of a more authentic, progressive, inclusive, heart-centered consciousness. Not just inclusive in terms of gender and race and ethnicity, all that is important, but internally inclusive, where we're now bringing back all of our parts and calling that an awakening experience, And the shift from survivalism to authenticity is huge and gigantoid, and will take centuries. And the real question is, do we have centuries to cross that bridge?
Yeah, and I don't know about that. I mean, you read, we got 10 years or 50, who knows? But I think that that's part of what I see happening is that you can sense, just even in terms of what's going on in terms of social media, and younger people. My kids are like, they have an amazing bullshit meter. My daughter, I took my daughter the other day to class. A friend of mine was doing some development work because they want to teach teenagers something. And so I took my daughter and her friend, and it was very interesting because my daughter came out of the class. I said, so what did you think? And she said to me, she said, this is the same thing that happened. They try to teach us, not meet us. And it was such a wise thing for her to say. She said, because they diminish our culture. I'm not one of those moms who says social media is bad. And look, that's her culture. But how can we use culture to help people feel safe again? Because we've been in survival mode and we don't even know how to feel safe. Nobody feels safe. I mean, it's hard to feel safe in this world because if you're not rich, we have to redefine everything. We have to redefine success. We have to redefine, our entire system needs to dramatically shift. It's a
survivalist system. So unconscionable capitalism makes perfect sense if you're a survivalist, because you'll do anything, like Trump will do anything he has to do to survive. So, we stand on the shoulders of that kind of insanity, actually, in many ways, in our movement towards a more conscionable capitalism.
Right. And the question is, people always talk about, Marianne's running for president, and everyone always says to me, will you vote for Marianne? And I step back and I go, I agree with everything that she's talking about in terms of we need to have a heart-centered way of living. There's a woman that I worked for a while ago. She wrote a really amazing book called Buddhist Economics. She's out of Berkeley. She's a wonderful educator. She has a whole system. And it's like, yeah, this is the way it should be. But getting people to change their minds and get out of what they've known for so long, that's the hardest choice. Because it's actually, when you think about what Marianne and some of these people, like the woman who wrote Claire Brown, it's perfectly logical. It's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. And we'd all be so much happier if we just lived that way. But
well, how do we get there?
Well, how do we get there is unfortunately, it requires a lot of people to be willing to go there and sacrifice and to sort of say, okay, I'm not driving the car. I'm not like what I did at the beginning of this year for myself, because I just wanted to know if it was possible. I was like, I wanted to know, can I get off the rat race? Can I get off the treadmill and still survive? And, I did. I sold everything I owned, just about. We had one suitcase. We traveled around with me and the two kids. We didn't buy, we didn't vacation and buy tons of crap. It was like, let's have experiences. Let's eat the food. Let's live in a house, not rent in a fancy hotel. It was an experience, because I just wanted to see, what does it feel like when you check out of the game? And I think that is incredibly hard for people to feel like you can do. I did it. I survived. And not only I survived, I thrived, and I came back to LA because my kids are like, hey, we want to go back to school. I took my kids out of school because it's, soul killing. And we just, when we came back, we had so much more clarity about where we wanted to go and what our choices were in our pathways, because we knew, like, we don't have to do any of that stuff. Like, we actually have a choice. But that's what people have to really realize, is that you have a choice, you have to choose it. And that means that, you won't necessarily have the fancy car or these things. You won't have the story, but that's tough. It's tough to do. And a lot of people are going to have to choose it simultaneously if we're really going to get there.
There's millions of ways to walk this earth, the unconscionable marketing structures want us to believe there's only 4 or 5, because then consumerism preys on the uncentered. The moment we're uncentered, it's very easy for us to get sucked in. But when we find our way back to purpose and find our center, we realize there's lots of ways to walk this earth. So, how's the book doing?
The book is doing well. You know what? Hang on. I'm going to show everybody. I have a copy right here.
Great.
Bring it. It's fun. It's like hanging out with Jeff Brown in my house. There it is.
Yeah, nice.
And part of the book is the idea of, like, how is social media impacting our lack of depth and meaning.
They certainly don't want us too deep, do they?
No, they don't. So it's doing well, and people can buy it at Amazon. Or I always tell people, if you've got a favorite bookstore, it's probably not in your favorite bookstore, but if you go into your favorite bookstore, they can totally order it.
Yeah.
And that's a great way for them to make.
Right.
It's in the system, and just search for my name. There's 19 other authors, but if they search for my name, and there's I'm excited about what we're doing at Rampant Feline. I'm excited what I'm up to in terms of using the skills that I have to continue this conversation. Exactly what you're talking about, grounded spirituality, getting real, learning, and I'm trying to do it through media and through storytelling. That's sort of my passion.
That's your thing.
But I think it's possible, and I don't think it's as hard as we've told ourselves it is.
I think we can make all kinds of changes if we're willing to do the real work and to get undistracted and to get centered and come back into our bodies and look around and see things more clearly. One of the problems now is sometimes I see people share my stuff and she says, like, Betsy, you got to take a look at this. I know it's really long, but if you wait till the last sentence, it's worth the wait. And it's a paragraph long. So, we have a problem. I have a problem. I wrote a 408-page book, and most people don't have time to read a 14-page book anymore because we are so overwhelmed and overstimulated, and we need to learn how to step back from this, to reconnect to ourselves, to have this experience of what I call solitude, because so much of my own transformation happened in the heart of that solitude, and it's very hard to find it in the heart of the overwhelm. Not in the heart of the world, if you're in the world in the right way. I think it's all there, but yeah.
Well, it's just a matter of being okay with who you are and not having to like, for me, it's literally was sort of not, I don't actually have to live up to anything other than my own values, morals, and ethics. That's really it. Everything else is just what the paradigm is trying to push on me, but I don't have to buy into it.
Right.
That's if you can get, my feeling like was once I got that, like, I still have stress about money and about men, about kids. I mean, all that shows up, but it shows up in a way now for me that I have my spirituality is that I have a deep sense and connection with that I've had a great life, and it's good. It's all going to be good. No matter what comes my way, it will be good. But it takes some practice getting there, and part of it is testing the waters a little bit,
Absolutely. Sounds like you're more shielded from the madness of the world than you used to be.
Well, I think so. Yeah, it took a lot of practice and a lot of work.
Yeah, it takes time.
To say we're going to be okay, And some days I'm not. Sometimes I'm really sad. I look at what's going on in the world and I want to cry my eyes out. But I'm also really okay with waking up going, today, I feel really sad. Okay, let's be present with that. Not, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You're not being very spiritual. You must not have meditated long enough. And obviously your crystal's not working because, you're supposed to, whatever the dance is. And then,
that'll really get you far. I think if we want to live a more spiritual life, we just need to live a more human life. That's a crap. What a concept.
Well, there's one thing. My friend wrote a book about killing the ego and why that was such
Oh, God, don't do that. I couldn't have this conversation without an ego.
No, it was a good book. It was really about this whole notion that we've, been fed a pack of lies with this notion that we need to kill our ego. And I loved what she was. That was part of one of the things that I started with my own life, is going, God, I don't have to kill my ego. Phew.
Thank God for that.
Right?
There's a lot to be said for having a healthy ego. So Betsy, a healthy ego. Well, not an unhealthy ego, but a healthy ego. A balanced, sturdy, good sense of self, good sense of your own magnificence without you thinking you're all that. Finding that perfect point of merger where the oceans of essence meet the individual droplet of meaning, where you matter, but you're not the whole ocean. We can't manifest anything. Oprah couldn't have done anything that she did in this world if she didn't believe in herself and have a healthy ego. And if the whole ego is completely destroyed, disparaged, and discredited, we're absolutely incapable of changing anything in this world. So let's honor the healthy ego, Betsy. Let's just start on honoring the healthy ego movement worldwide and tell everybody how fucking amazing they are and tell them to stop hating themselves. I mean, what a confusing thing to go into psychotherapy to try to work through and strengthen and ennoble the self-concept, and then walk into a so-called spiritual environment and be told that you have to absolutely eradicate and destroy your ego in order to be enlightened. Talk about a fucking mind fuck for humanity. Honest to God, utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
Die and kill.
Yeah, dissolution of the self is the only way home. Like, if there's no self, how do I get home? I don't even have feet anymore. It doesn't even make sense. These people are all crazy. It's insanity. Anyway, thank you for spending an hour of your Los Angeles day with me here, and encourage people to go and check out your book. I liked it. There were a number of essays in there that were really cogent, clear, powerful, right on. Chris Grosso, my buddy, wrote the foreword. Chris is, the thing about Chris is, like, he's a spiritual guy or something, whatever we call that, but he's so real. I mean, he couldn't be pretentious spiritually if he tried. And that's, Sean Corn's like that, and Andrew Harvey's like that, Philip Shepard's like that. Those are the people I love, the ones who are, trying to do sacred, purposeful work in this world like you are, but, could not be pretentious if they tried.
Right. I love him.
Those are
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. We'll see you again.